Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right via Egberto Off the Record on Substack. Today, I'm very honored to have a special person. I met this young man at a resort in upstate New York on a program that we called Jedi for Democracy. We're a group of folks from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, all social statuses, etc., got together to try to see how we could create better communication, create a better America, if you will. That is one of the things we were working towards here. So without further ado, I want to welcome Pedro, I said it wrong, Senhorinha Silva. How you doing, my dear brother?
I'm good, man. And I'm just good to be in conversation with you. You always bring the energy, so it's cool to just be up here with you.
Well, let me tell you, you wrote a piece, and you do a lot of writing on newsletters on the LinkedIn platform, and I saw you sent me an email with one that you did on Substack, and I want to tell you that it got me extremely excited because that level of writing. I talk to people about Substack a whole lot, and we can probably say it about LinkedIn, and say that a lot of the best writing and ideas generally come from not the folks you're seeing on TV every day, but folks that are out there living, folks that are out there meeting people. And you are one of those people. I met you in New York, upstate New York, at a resort where we discussed dealing with people. And I can't tell you how impressed, first of all, I've been with the way you think and now with the way you write. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Pedro Senhorinha Silva because my dad is Cape Verdean. So I grew up between two different Black diasporic kind of conditions where I had one family member who was from Africa, essentially Cape Verde, Portuguese colonized country. And then my mom, who her family's from these islands called Dominica in the Caribbean, but my mom grew up in the United States.
You are such a dynamic character. I want to have you on 2 different live sessions.
Yes,
but what I had you on for today's live is an article that you wrote that I went ahead and reposted on my Substack called The Illusion of Merritt, an allegory.
Yeah.
And while I loved that article and understood that article, why I wanted to talk more about it is I thought that article would fly over some of the people who need to understand that article, what it's really about.
Right.
So what I want to talk about is that article was pretty much explaining the genesis of Donald Trump in allegorical form.
Right.
And it was so well written. Tell me how that came about.
Well, honestly, it came about because I was on a trip to DC with my daughter, and we went to the African American Museum, the Smithsonian African American History Museum. And when I was in the bottom of the museum where they were talking about slavery and having pieces of slave ships and stuff, there was a guy there rocking a MAGA hat. And I was like, this guy.
Okay.
I'm like, this guy's rocking this MAGA hat. And there was MAGA people all over the place. But I just thought to myself, like, I wanted to say to him, hey, man, like, is anything going on inside of your mind that would make you feel some tension about wearing this hat at this slavery museum with Black people around you? And I was just like, kind of like really wanted to say something to him, but I knew my daughter would be embarrassed if I said something to him. So I kind of just like held it inside and was trying to figure out, how do I process this? And as I was trying to process it, at first it started off as kind of almost like a frustration. Then it started trying to build up to like anger, just different things. And then something inside of me said, you know what? Just take this energy and turn it into something, like fictionalize it, but then just unpack it that way so that you can process it and get it out of your system without just like either, saying it in an angry way or something like that. And actually, as I was writing it, I really meant it to be more critical. But as I was writing it and kind of engaging with the characters by fictionalizing it, I found myself having this internal dialogue that actually went in a direction that I didn't even intend when I first started writing it. At first, I just wanted to write it about somebody being oblivious and not understanding, these things, because I also saw a person with a MAGA hats on at the Holocaust Museum Memorial, like down the road. And I was just like, what? How are they? Oh, sorry. Somebody tried to call me. But I was like, how are they wearing this hat with all this stuff going on? So it was a release for me. Ultimately was what it was, to like process all of this and try to understand what could possibly be going on in the people's brains that would make them not be curious about how they're perceived when they are in those spaces, and yeah.
Your fictional character, who was on a research mission to how can this be, actually found themselves I want to say this right, and I'm sort of getting in the middle of the story, I know, but sort of finding themselves engaged in the system and maybe falling for the system as well. And the reason I start there is I want to tell you a little story, and then I'm going to ask you to tell the entire premise of the document. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to understand, in the days it wasn't MAGA, in the day it was Tea Party. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember a guy named Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, of course.
Okay. Well, I wanted to see what these people were going through. And I went ahead and I spent an entire week listening to Rush Limbaugh. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you something, how addictive that stuff was. It was so addictive that I started to take some of the nasty evilness of Rush Limbaugh, internalize it, mm-hmm. and expounded that on others as well. Well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? After 1 week of listening to Rush Limbaugh, this stuff works on that part of your brain mm-hmm. that it is fight, flight, and it is really dangerous. And it takes people like yourself, what we're doing, to really get to folks to prevent that. Folks ask me, why do I engage MAGA? Why do I engage the conservative right of people that are doing all these things? It's because it's an illness. I actually got infected from just a week. Think about it, you're living it all your entire existence.
Yep.
So tell us your story. Tell us about this fictional character.
Yeah. So originally, this character, he was going undercover to investigate, because a scientist wanted to understand what's going on in these folks' minds so that we can reverse it. So that if we understand how they became so attached to these ideas and all these things, then we can help these people come out of it, because it was not trying to condemn people for being caught up in these kinds of ideologies, but just trying to understand it. And what ended up happening, and I would hope for people to read it, but what ends up happening is, after spending enough time with the people, his brain starts to adapt to that kind of thinking. And then he sees the value, not in a positive way, but the value of people shutting off different parts of their brain, which this is kind of based in like behavioral science, mm-hmm. the ideas that I'm talking about, which goes into that other piece that you're wanting to talk about, bias. But what happens, and this happens to us all the time, just like how you said you were exposed for a week to this kind of content, what ends up happening is it triggers your amygdala, and your amygdala is that part that is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, basically your survival instincts. And we have been taught, conditioned, whatever the case may be, that we have to, we need people in order to survive, which is how it is. For millions of years or whatever, we've needed a community to ensure our survival over time. And one of the easiest ways to be able to ensure your survival is to align yourself with what seems to be the stronger forces. And then you put your the part of your prefrontal cortex that's able to kind of make those kind of conscious decisions. You just turn that off, and you just allow that amygdala to run the show, because that amygdala will keep you alive. That's what it's supposed to do. At least it believes that. But mm-hmm. the thing is that the amygdala, when it's hijacked and it thinks that it's doing what it needs to do to keep you alive, it can really be destroying you. but it's so biased that it can't take in any information except for what will keep me alive, And so people, once they get that amygdala hijacked, it's like they're not even functionally operating. And I'll wind this piece up real quick. There's this book called Moral Man and Immoral Society by Reinhold Niebuhr. And it basically posits that a person by themselves can be very moral, but if they get in a group, their morality goes down to the lowest common denominator. Now, if you were in a benevolent group, it would go up. But if you're in a group that has a decreased capacity for benevolence, then your capacity is going to go down as well. And so this is what happened to this character is after he spent time with these people and he was instructed in order to get the most out of the experience. He couldn't read any information that was contrary to what they were teaching. And so once he did that, he was gone. He was gone, and then it's like his effort to come out of it and the struggle to come out of it is basically what the allegory is about. But it's kind of peppered or seasoned with cognitive science and behavioral science, but I just did it in an allegorical way so that because the other thing is our brains don't have the same defense for fiction as it does for things that we would think are factual, because we are part of our brain that wants to be like entertained or distracted also is a survival instinct to be distracted. And so I basically was like, you know what? I know this information. Let me just write it as fiction so that it's reading as a story so that people's defenses can come down so some of the information can get in.
And I think that's a good way of doing it. In what I do, I try in trying to reach people where they are. I don't quite use the method as far as an allegory. And, maybe that is another tool that I should start to use, what you've developed there and, tell the story in allegorical form. Because, immediately as I read the story, or read your article, read your newsletter, I saw, wow, this is MAGA. These are Republicans who know better, but joined MAGA because, of the groupthink that you speak about. Everything that you mentioned in that article, I could set who the protagonists are in this right-wing machine.
Right.
And that was scary. And the next thing I said to myself is, and I think when I posted it with that kind of a message that says, folks like me, you, and a lot of our more progressive listeners that are on right now, they would get it immediately.
Right.
But I wonder, and this will be a good experiment to see how the MAGA person sees themselves as following the Führer, how that, if they see themselves in that and that sort of a thing, because it is so important. But I think that one paper that you wrote there should sort of be, first of all, I think it can give progressives that are just thrown that their hands up in the air and said, to hell with these people, I don't care.
Right.
It humanizes some of these folks that are disturbed.
Right.
And give them a better thing. There's a time that there's a guy at Starbucks where I always talk to folks who sat down with me and he was pretty much into what we were saying and agreed with all of it. But then I went into Starbucks one time and saw him with his crowd. And that guy, when he saw me walk into Starbucks that day, the fear that I saw in his eyes, that please don't out me with my crowd.
Exactly.
He didn't have to say anything.
Right.
I read it in his eyes and I knew how to behave. And days after, he comes back and he talks as if it's nothing. He never mentioned anything about it, but he knew that I know that protect me.
Right.
I'm with you, but this is my crowd. Protect me. Your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, one thing I should share with people is I was raised on the right. I was raised conservative. I was raised Republican. I was raised on focus on the family out of Colorado Springs, all of that stuff, the moral majority, all those things I was raised on. So I understand the idea of being in a group and of belonging, but I was raised, from a Christian perspective. So the trippy thing with me is that I was very much I was a pastor, for those of y'all up here, I was a pastor for almost a dozen years, but I no longer am one. There's articles about why I'm not a pastor too, but I grew up with that. And I was invited to get out of my church when I was conservative for the crime of saying I didn't want to say negative things about people I didn't know anything about. And I didn't realize that was a crime because I was still innocent enough at the time that I didn't realize that saying, oh, I don't like, without going too far. And my pastor at my church did a sermon that was really just disparaging everybody that wasn't us. And a lot of people in the church were excited about it. This is an all black church. And they were like, yeah, hallelujah. And then and some people were like, oh, the sermon was amazing today, right? And I was kind of like, I don't know. And just me saying, I don't know if the sermon, basically, I don't know if that sermon was great. And some people said, well, what was the problem with it? And I said, well, I don't understand why he had to say, thank God I'm not a Muslim. Thank God I'm not a Buddhist. Thank God I'm not a Hindu. Thank God I'm not a gay. He said all these things. And then his ending thing was because I have Jesus. And I was like, why didn't you just say I have Jesus and be happy? Why did you have to say all this stuff about everybody else? And then all of a sudden, people just started whispering about me saying, hey, I think he is one of those liberal people. And I legitimately did not know what a liberal was. I had never even heard the word. I never heard it. And then people started accusing me of being one. And then eventually I ended up around them. But I didn't know anything about it. But the terror, I'll tell you, I didn't ask to get kicked out. So the pain of them inviting me out was torture. And so because I know that pain, I can understand why some people who may think differently are afraid to admit that because they don't want to lose their belonging, because then that messes with their survival, which then gets into their amygdala, which then keeps them in this loop. And they don't know that it's happening most of the time. It's unconscious.
Well, it speaks more about you that you are able, above and beyond all of that, to actually be able to tell truth. You have Mark, she says, right-wing and billionaire media setting up stupid people. Geez. B. Warren says, by the way, that book on Amazon, the book you mentioned, is $27, paperback $45, and there are only 3 copies. There are only 3 copies with me, she says. John Starkey says a lot of people are not so strong and self-sufficient, and they fear negative feedback or any criticism for that matter. John B. Warren says used PB being start. Oh, that is a paperback stuff. But John Sharkey saw that, Warren. John Sharkey says a lot of people are not so strong and self-sufficient, and they fear negative feedback or any criticism for that matter. You are a free thinker, able to create, open yourself up for criticism. Those are that is very good, but that is so true, Pedro. But look, the church that kind of eased you out, was that the only church that you were a pastor of, or did you become a pastor of another church?
I became a pastor after I got kicked out of that church. I wasn't even a pastor when they asked me to leave. I was just a parishioner, and they started saying to me, "You're not a pastor. You don't know what you're talking about," and blah blah blah. Then I ended up going to seminary and becoming a pastor. And then I became a pastor in progressive Christian churches, which
that's what I thought, because you kind of confused me for a bit, because I thought that's where you were at the second outing, if you will.
Yeah. When I was at that other church, everybody before I got asked to leave, they were telling me, oh, God's got a calling on your life to be a pastor. And they were pushing me to be a pastor. But then when I criticized what the pastor said, then they were like, you're not a pastor. And then they just turned on me. And then I took a number of years, and then I went to seminary, really expecting not to make it through, because I, again, didn't know about liberal Christianity. So, and then found out I had gone into a liberal seminary. I didn't even know it, because that's how much I didn't know they existed. And then I heard all these different ideas, and I was like, nobody got mad at me. And then I was like, what is this denomination? And then they told me, and then that's what I ended up joining. And the reason I ended up joining, I joined the United Church of Christ. But the reason I joined it was because a guy who would later become one of my mentors had gotten kicked out of his church, and he had a mega church. His name was Carlton Pearson, and he lost his everything. And when he lost everything, he went into United Church of Christ. And I said, well, if they took him, I know they'll take me. And so that's how I ended up in this progressive movement. But one thing I want to throw out here about the billionaire thing that somebody said earlier is, if I can get you to look up anything, look up Mimetic Theory by Rene Girard. Mimetic Theory by Rene Girard, and it's Renegirard. He's an anthropological philosopher. I learned about him in seminary. Mimetic theory basically says that most people don't know what they want. They just mimic other people's desires. So if they see somebody else with something, then they want what they see other people with. So like you can see, like imagine you have two little kids, nobody's playing with this ball. Then one kid picks up the ball, then all of a sudden the other kid wants that same ball because when they see somebody else with it, then they can imagine themselves having that same thing. And then then the tension comes, right? So this is most of us. Most of us do not know what we want. We just look outside of ourselves, see what somebody else has, and then think, oh, I should want that. And these are the markers of success. This is how you survive. All these things. And this is all mimetic theory, right? But Rene Girard also teaches that most societies are built on what he calls the founding murder, which is like
on what? What's that?
The founding murder, like the founding murder. So who did this society have to kill in order for them to be who they are?
Oh,
who did they have to scapegoat? Who did they have to make the bad person? Because the society will then, it ends up framing other people. Because now, if you see some other people getting killed, you're like, well, I don't want that to happen to me.
Exactly.
So, I don't want that to happen to me. So let me just back up, let it happen to them, and let everything get built around these people and as a scapegoat. And then that's how societies are basically built. And Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel, who you know who he is.
PayPal, yeah.
Yeah. He is very much into mimetic theory and Rene Girard. And understands that is how people tend to function.
And they apply their policies in such a manner to make them behave. Yeah.
Right. And then the irony of the universe, which is a very strange place to be, is there's another theory and it's called memetics, but it's spelled differently. It's MEMETIC, which is where memes come from. And that's the theory of how ideas spread. So how do ideas become viral? And that is by Richard Dawkins. And basically, if you take mimetic theory from Rene Girard and mimetic theory from this Dawkins guy, you put it together.
It's destructive as hell.
Yeah. It's just like, okay, we're going to spread this idea. We're going to get these people thinking this. They are going to then conform to these ideas because they look outside of themselves for success of what to do and what not to do, who to not be involved with, who to be involved, who to align themselves with, all because they don't want to die because of the fear of death. You play with all of that and you can just pull people here, there, everywhere. It's just a thing to make them like a marionette. It's the two hands of the marionette.
Puppets, yeah.
Yeah. And it's happening to almost all of us, almost all day, almost all the time. Most of us don't know it. And even if once we discover it, because most of us have like a shame loop. So our shame loop makes us ashamed that we were fooled. And so rather than admit like, oops, my bad, we just go ahead and put our heads in the sand like an ostrich and just try to make it all go away. And it's a very terrible spiral that many of us are in. I personally believe there's a way out, but most people, in my experience, most people won't take that way out.
I'm going to want to close out with a short synopsis of your way out. But before we go there, I want to say, Kimmy says religion is inherently divisive. This is why it is imperative to have separation of religion and state. Then she says, we must have human rights and civil rights at all, regardless of religion. Then John Sharkey says, one light, many windows, which is very true. So before we go, though, I want to say that I met and I interviewed another person that was pretty much kicked out of their church as well. He has a great newsletter here, The Beautiful Mess by John Pavlovitz. I don't know if you've met him online.
I've tried to, I almost tried to get him to be a speaker at the last church I was serving. Then I quit the church, so I never was able to follow through.
Yeah. I found one of his articles and it touched me so much. I asked him to do an interview. And Pavlovitz, I love his writings. I love his compassion. And I think I hope you pick up that sort of traction here on Substack, because there's a whole lot that I think you have to offer, especially in these times where folks are just, yes, we're getting siloed. My thing is to break down these silos, and because I think people are inherently good, but under what you're saying, they're scared. And I think the theory that you talked about is a theory of staying alive. What is it called? The killing theory or the murder theory?
The founding murder.
The founding murder. So
murder.
I mean,
that's what Rene Girard teaches, that most societies, like in America, they did annihilation of the indigenous people
right.
and to take the land, and then, black bodies to be able to cultivate the land. So those are the founding murders upon which this society is built. And then everyone in their mind knows, well, I don't want to end up like a black person. I don't want to end up, and so they regulate themselves they don't want to be treated like a black person is most people's idea of freedom.
Right.
Freedom is not being treated like a black person. Liberty is not being treated like a black person.
Imagine that. And that allows the oppressor to oppress just about everybody. Everybody. And that's what's done. Now, Pedro, the thing here is this, right? We need to close it here, but I just want everybody to go ahead and read his article. It's right now in my note. It points to his article, which is titled "The Illusion of Merritt and Allegory." It's a great article that one should read on Substack here by Pedro Senhorinha Silva. Look it up. Anyway, Pedro, you said you have this solution many won't want to follow. I think it's not about many won't want to follow. We have to encourage them to follow. What is it we're talking about here?
You have to be able to love yourself without qualifications. But the thing is, when you love yourself without qualifications, it will tell you, if you love yourself with all your flaws, all your mess, all your other things, the thing that ends up telling your brain is you have to also do it for other people. And that's the thing that they'll say, well, I would definitely want to do it for me, but I don't want to do it for anybody else. And the way the loop works is you have to be able to, that's why a lot of those teachings say, treat people the way you want to be treated, do unto others, regardless of the religions. Religions they're not divisive in themselves. People are divisive because they want to survive, and they can take anything and use it as a tool of division. But to undo that tool of division, you have to start off with yourself. That's why even in the Bible, it says, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's like you have to start with yourself. So if you look at yourself in the midst of everything, and one of the things I've done for myself is I've looked myself in the mirror and say, you're so beautiful. I love you the most. I'm so glad you're here. And that undoes a lot of the trauma that ends up happening. Like, because when we're kids, we want to be seen as beautiful. We want to be loved. We want people to be grateful for our presence. And then different messaging tells us otherwise, that we need to earn all these things. So to reverse that, you have to be able to tell yourself or reparentify yourself, like be your own parent, become your own parent or something like that. Work on that. And then you'll naturally build your compassion. So you'll look at other people and realize that they used to be a child. They used to want to be loved, seen as beautiful, and for people to be glad that they're there, just hold them. And that's how it works. But a lot of times we don't take it because we don't want to give it,
Look, Pedro, I'm glad that you said that. If you listen to all my lives, and not the lives, but my radio program, etc., I always end the program with, I love you all. And I mean that from the depths of my heart. And I think, I think good minds think alike, because once somebody called into KPFT and said, what is the answer? And I said, it's going to sound corny, but it is love.
It is.
And I said it sounds corny, but it is love. And if you can actually care about somebody else, if you can really love unconditionally, then you can solve all these problems. Because again, we're all flawed human beings. And just remember that. Pedro, give me a one sentence closer. We got to get out of here.
Love yourself. And I look forward to our next conversation, because I would recommend.
Thank you very much, folks. That we had the honor of speaking to Pedro. I'm not going to say the middle one right now. Pedro Silva, my buddy from that I met in upstate New York. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right via Egberto Off the Record. I simply love your writing, and I love your thought process.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you for putting forth the effort to invite me up here. And thanks everybody who joined. Appreciate you. Love yourself, and spread it.
spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead, number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.